Talk Radio. You're in to all things music.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Now you know how I will beg, borrow, and steal. This heat is gonna save me. Fever misbehave me. Watch it spike. You're gonna like it, 'cause I'm in the ring and I'm a knockout. So watch out, bring it. It's like you think I'm supposed to die, or at least step aside, slink off and hide and dry my eyes.
Welcome to Making It with me, your host, Terry Woolman. I really appreciate you joining us every week, and you all who are listening and spending the hour with us are the reason that we do this show and the reason my guests come on to share their stories with you. So thank you for that. You can find all of our episodes on entertalkmedia.com, Spotify, or go to iTunes under podcast and look up Making It with Terry Woolman. You can download and stream for free at your convenience. I created this show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the music business. And my guest today, Jonatha Brooke, who you just heard a little bit of music from, is an artist that I have been absolutely enjoying and following since the early 90s. And it's really a treat for me to bring her on the show today. So I'm just going to jump right in. Let me tell you a little bit about Jonatha. Jonatha Brooke has been writing songs, making records, and touring since the early 90s. After 4 major label releases, she started her own independent label, Bad Dog Records, in 1999, and has since released 8 more albums. Her 2 most recent, the companion CD to her critically acclaimed one-woman off-Broadway musical, My Mother Has 4 Noses, and 2016's Midnight Hallelujah. Jonatha has co-written songs with Katy and the Courtyard Hounds. She's also written for 4 Disney films, numerous television shows, and she composed and performed the theme song for Joss Whedon's Dollhouse. In 2014, Miss Brooke debuted her one-woman musical, My Mother Has 4 Noses, at the Duke Theater on 42nd Street in New York City. The show ran for 3 months to rave reviews and was a critic's pick in the New York Times. She performed a one-month-long run of My Mother Has 4 Noses at the Jungle Theater in Minneapolis in 2018. Jonatha is currently touring nationally and internationally in support of her latest album, Imposter, and teaching songwriting workshops along the way. Jonatha Brooke, welcome to Making It.
Well, thank you so much. It makes me feel tired.
Right.
all those things I've been doing. I need a nap.
Me too. I'm exhausted just reading that. Well, you have been busy. I mean, one of the things, correct me if I'm wrong, the appearance is that you haven't really stopped, for a long time. I don't mean that you haven't taken breaks, but I mean, you consistently keep, you're tenacious. I think you're a really tenacious artist. You're a very creative person, but you keep finding ways to keep it going. In the ever-changing landscape of, what's left of the record industry.
Right. Well, thank you. Yes.
You're welcome. And I respect that.
Well, thanks. And I think that, it's a necessity. I mean, longevity is hard won. But I also, thank goodness, I'm an artist who I try not to repeat myself. And that's been really at the top of my list of I don't want to make the same record over and over again. I don't want to do the same thing year after year. So, if stuff comes up that feels imperative and feels like a new thing that will challenge me and scare me to death, then I'm probably going to try it.
That's so great that you said that, because I love fear. I think it's healthy. And there's when I was in high school, there is a book that I read called Embrace Mountain, Return to Tiger. It's a Lao Tzu, book of Proverbs. And, essentially that one proverb really is about walking towards your fear, not running from it, but walking towards it to really embrace it for opportunities, and I think it's great that you're not afraid to be afraid.
Yeah, I guess when I'm not afraid, then I guess it'll be over. I'll have to throw in the towel. I mean, I think that my one woman show, I mean, that was sort of the pinnacle of fear, because it was, it was a whole new world for me. I'd never thought of myself as an actor, and to build this show ourselves and produce it ourselves and then take it to Off-Broadway, like we were across from Lion King, for goodness sake, on 42nd Street. So
That's
there
bold.
I am. I know, little Jonatha Brooke and my guitar player and my cellist and my story, and 10 songs and a story. But I just realized that this particular story was theater. It wasn't just another record. And so I was like, well, okay, I guess, I've done scary things before. Let's try the most scary thing. And it worked out.
Do you think some of that attitude that you have is from being a professional dancer, in your early years?
I think there's certainly the discipline to keep at something is rooted in my dance training. I mean, I started dancing when I was 6, and then I danced until I was about 30, and that's when the record deal kind of made the decision for me to really take a left turn and go into the music business. But I think that informs.
Was that a hard decision for you?
It wasn't at the time. There a few years later, I kind of missed the physicality of modern dance and being somebody's physical clay, and just the exhilaration of that absolute bone exhaustion at the end of a day. But I didn't miss the pain.
Right.
And I still, as much as traveling is grueling, I still love performing. I love being on tour, and I love being able to sing my little songs every night.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's important. By the way, how do you stay healthy on the road? I mean, do you go to the gym, or do you walk, or do you still go drop in and take class? If I have the time, I will look for a Bikram yoga class, because I know what I'm getting into. It's the same no matter where you are in the world. Right.
So I've been known to do that. Often I will just go for a walk, and I'll, the rules are kind of suspended when I'm on tour, and
right.
I try to eat healthy and not drink a lot, and ton of water, and take a walk and stretch. That's about all I got.
So you've been writing songs, making records, and touring since the early 90s. Let's back up. Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing, growing up in Massachusetts and the early years, elementary school? What was your family like? Oh
my God. Well, my family's very musical. My dad was a trumpet player. My oldest brother is a bagpiper. My mom played the piano badly, but she played. And my other brother was a really talented pianist, and then went into theater. So we were all artsy fartsy kids. My dad was also a journalist. So writing was this most revered profession. Writing and teaching was like the gold standard. So, I was an English major in college, but there was also this love of the arts and respect for the arts, and this sense of possibility. And my parents were amazing supporters of whatever it was that I chose to do it at any given moment. And I think that's a huge lucky break. I didn't have anyone staring me down and saying, you must, come up with a career that will sustain you financially, because God knows modern dance doesn't. And music is probably the second worst choice you can make.
Right.
But they were just thrilled with what I was creating, and thrilled that I had this. I was very disciplined and very organized about what I wanted, and they were right behind me. It was pretty amazing.
From what I understand, about you, especially the fact that your dad being a journalist and your mom being a poet, is that language and words were really loved and respected in your family, and that makes sense because your lyrics. I've always been mesmerized by your lyrics, in all the years that you've been making records, and now I have a better understanding of why.
Yeah, I mean, misspeaking or saying too many times in conversation, or just not being articulate about what it was you were thinking was kind of a no in the family. And dad being a journalist and mom being a poet, there was just this deep respect for language and telling a story well, in whichever way you chose to tell it, whether it was a song or an essay or a poem. Mom particularly was so emotional about language. I mean, for her, it was life and death. She could just like chew on a poem for a week and just weep to it, or like thrill to it, or sing to it. It was just this very emotional connection for her with language. And so I think I absorbed a lot of that.
Well, and also, you told me that you are obsessed with books. So it's not just language and output, but also input, reading. You love reading.
Absolutely. And I've gotten, so many of my songs have been inspired by great writing, either poetry or fiction or even nonfiction. There's always a turn of phrase somewhere, or a way someone has told a story that will surprise me and delight me and lead me to a new song.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, just for clarity, if the name of that book that I read in high school is Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain.
Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So speaking of words and names, I know that you started your own record label, and before we get into the whys, besides the obvious reasons of the record industry changing, I love a good record label name. My label is Mango Eater Music, and yours is there you go. And yours is Bad Dog, and clearly each of our companies' names have a backstory. Besides the obvious shift in the record industry, what inspired you to create your independent label, Bad Dog Records, and also how did you come up with the name?
Well, the name was inspired by my two bad dogs. I had two very bad dogs. I had a golden retriever who was completely willful and untrainable, or I'm sure it's always the humans that are the problem, but Molly was just a pain in the butt. And then I had this amazing dog Hunter who he just would run away a lot. And I'd always find him down at the local bar and they'd feed him out the back door. So there was no way to stop him from doing that. But one of my very early songs is called Dog Dreams. And so there's this theme in all of the names that I've called my various entities that has to do with dogs. So there's Dog Dream Music is one of my publishing entities. Bad Dog Records is my label. And then I have a new publishing entity called Naughty Puppy. And then I was thinking if there might be a fourth one that would be like, nasty bitch or sassy bitch or, something
right.
like that still was a dog thing, but had a little more, even more bite to it. But that didn't seem, I don't need that.
Why are you starting a new publishing company? Are you expanding, or is it for something specific like film, TV, music?
Well, I had made a publishing deal back in the mid-90s. And so all of my Dog Dream Music publishing sort of fell under that deal. Mm-hmm. But then as I started writing new music and not wanting it necessarily to, be part of that particular debt, I decided to make a new entity called Naughty Puppy. And the whole starting my own label was just like, all right, I've had enough of this major label crap. 3 times in a row, I'd had a single that was charting at my particular radio format. My go-to person at the label had either moved on or been axed, or there was some kind of regime change happening, and I was lost in the shuffle. And so after the third time of that, it was kind of clear that, all right, I had taken advantage of the labels, and it was a great ride, and they gave me all this money to make these beautiful records, and they gave me some tour support. So I had the luxury of their help building, an audience and a fan base and a track record.
Right.
So I'll take it from here, kids. I think I'm done with this roller coaster. And that's when I started Bad Dog. And just initially I was going to just test out the waters and put out a live record and to see what happened. But it went so well, and it felt so much more like something I could sustain, that I continued. And it's 8 records later.
Well, and in the early years, and I'm guessing it's still similar for you, when you started Bad Dog, you were literally hands-on. I mean, you were signing CDs and shipping them, and exploring how to use the internet to develop your relationship, with your direct contact with your fans. And my perspective of you is that you didn't resist it, you embraced it, and you figured out what to do.
Yeah, I think we were one of the first websites that figured out, or had someone help us figure out e-commerce and how to do, this is before Kickstarter, how to involve the fans in fan funding. Mm-hmm. And I think Back in the Circus was the record that we used that for. And so we were kind of on the early edge of figuring that out and involving. So
you
fans.
Encouraged your fans early on to be involved in essentially funding your records, like pre-buying your records or getting involved.
Yep.
Was that were you already signed with great management, and did you have your team in place, or is this something that you just did on that you spearheaded yourself?
Well, this was in partnership with my manager, who then became my husband.
Yes, Patrick Rains. Yes,
Patrick Rains. So we were sort of brainstorming and teamed up as we were also becoming a couple. So it sort of became inextricable. We had this idea to start the label and do this e-commerce thing on the website and involve the fans in making Back in the Circus, and then. That was around the time that we were actually falling in love and getting married and, moving to New York. And so it's all kind of indecipherable. It was like the brains and the creative all merged into one. And we're still a really good team. That was 22 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you chose well. And so did he. So did Patrick. I
think we're a really good team.
I do as well.
Thank you.
One of the things, you do so many things, and one of them that I read about was that you were a judge on the 10th and 11th annual Independent Music Awards, and also for the 5th and the 9th Independent Music Awards. And I know that you give workshops along, your touring schedule. You're always stopping and teaching songwriting classes and performance classes. And my question about being a judge is, and also when you are doing your workshops, do you have a point of view or a specific intention that you bring into being a judge and a mentor?
I have a very, very specific and very careful intention, because I'm just one person out of a gazillion. I'm one set of taste buds, and I'm one opinion. So I'm very careful in all of those contexts and settings to try to offer something constructive and really positive about what I'm looking at and what I'm listening to. And then being very, very careful with my critiques or, hey, this could be better, this part of the thing could be better, or like, what about a bridge, or wow, you could really take advantage of the downbeat on this hook. I mean, I think that would just nail it. Or like, where's the money note? Like what, I think that like, I'm craving you to go higher here. I love what you did. Could you also, what if you went up to the A on that downbeat? So just because I know what a paranoid psycho person I am about my own work, and when I'm first playing it for somebody and it's a fledgling idea and I have a glimmer of hope about it, but I'm not certain yet. I know what it's like to get the wrong kind of feedback too soon, and it could just splinter and die, and you could just curl into a ball in the corner and be devastated by, what some random person says. So I'm very conscious of that. And so I try to be a nurturing ear and a hopefully a constructive helper along the way rather than an asshole.
Right. Which so many people already, the position is very well filled already.
That position is taken. So
yeah.
I'm just trying to be like the nurturer in the corner.
Mm-hmm. That's more my approach as well. But all the while, with this very clear intention of wanting to be nurturing, you still want to encourage and push and challenge the artists that you work with to be more, to push the envelope, to see what more can you do with that?
Absolutely.
To turn it from wonderful to incredible.
Yeah. And in any given group of people that are coming to these workshops or submitting their stuff, there are people that they're just not listening and they never will. And so that's their bag, and they've got their thing and they're doing it, and they don't need to hear from me, and they're certain of their whatever. And that's awesome. And then there are people that are like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. Let me try that. Thank you so much. That really helped. So you just sort of, you gauge your opportunities and you say what you can and see what happens.
Let's talk about songwriting, from your point of view as well. For you, you've co-written with Katy and the Courtyard Hounds and some other really cool people that we're going to be talking about, including Woody Guthrie, which is a complete different part of this question. But I'm wondering, do you enjoy co-writing, or do you prefer writing alone and being more collaborative in the recording process, or do you love them both for different reasons?
It's definitely love-hate. There are times when it is just euphoria, and you're simpatico with your co-writer and you're having a ball, and it's like finishing each other's sentences, and you agree on all the ideas. And then there are times when you just want to die, and it's like a terrible date. And you're sitting there at the bar thinking like, what the hell have I done? Who is this loser? Why am I here? Or am I the loser?
Right.
What's going on? Like nothing is gelling. I'm out of ideas today and I suck. And gosh, I hope that I don't get a bad reputation. So it's gone both ways. I mean, there are people, I loved working with Katy Perry. I loved working with the Courtyard Hounds. I love writing with Eric Bazillion. We have a blast together. And I don't really remember like the things that didn't particularly go well.
And what is it name a couple of the things that you love about that process? Like you said, finishing each other's sentences.
Yeah, finishing each other's sentences. And for me in particular, because I love to overcomplicate things. I love to add way too much tension to every single possible chord, and let's add 4 more chords in between this and that. And, someone like Eric Bazillion will be like, Joe, listen, like, no, like 3 chords is plenty. Like, listen to the beat, listen to rock and roll. Like, you don't need all that crap. And so it's great when it's a combo of people that can be completely honest in a fun way with each other and say like, that is dumb, let's do this, or that's awesome, now let's add this. And so when it works great, I'm elevating the other person to maybe a little bit more complicated than their nature, and they're dumbing me down in the best way. because I can just be so overly precious about myself.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And, one of the things that I love about collaboration is when you get into that unknown territory and you open yourself up to it. And with this sort of understanding or confidence and belief that let's just try this. It's either going to suck or it's going to be amazing. Let's follow that path and see where this goes.
And then there have been a couple of situations where one in particular, there's a song I was working on that I kind of had in mind for my mom's show. This My Mother Has Four Noses, my one woman show, and it was called Superhero. And I shared my little fledgling idea with Madeline Peru because we had this writing date. I was like, well, she's Madeline Peru. I adore her. Let's see what happens if this little fledgling thing, if we work on it together. And we ended up having very different ideas about it. And her version of it is really different than mine, but that's how it ended up. So my version is on my record and her version is on her record. And we just share the publishing, but I hope that's okay.
I think
we were fine with it, but
yeah, I had a collaboration like that one time, and we, the artist and I both graciously decided that we would each release our own versions.
Yeah.
The song was still the song,
exactly.
and I think it's cool to have different. There. Yeah. Right. But to still have different perspectives on the production and the arranging and the point of view on how it's going to be. And
and especially if both people are performing songwriters and or recording songwriters, then that makes total sense, because of course they're going to have a different take on it because they have such a unique voice, whatever they're doing as a performer and artist is going to be different. It's different if you're solely like a songwriter, so that your stuff is always going to someone else to record and perform. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, speaking of that, because you also have had your songs placed in film and television, and you've had your songs covered by other artists. How do you make that happen? Is that something that Patrick and your management team and agents and everybody do, or is it more relationship based? Like, how do you get your songs in film and television? How do you, Jonatha, get other artists to sing your songs?
Well, it's been a while since I've had the luxury of anyone helping me with film and TV placements, and that's a bummer. It's just sort of a matter of how much you can accomplish in a day, and it's just me and Pat. It's a mom and pop operation. Back in the early 2000s, we had my friend Bambi who helping us, and she did great. She got a bunch of stuff on TV and film placements. She's the one that hooked me up, ironically, with Disney for my for the song I wrote for the Peter Pan sequel. And it's been harder since then. And as you probably know, the take is just so much different now. There's very little stuff that they're actually paying for because people are willing to bend over backwards and throw their song, and give it away, which sucks for all of us. At some point we should have gotten together and made a union and drawn the line and said, like, look, stop giving this shit away, man. You're killing it for all of us. It should be no less than 10 grand aside, and like that's the deal.
Right.
But
favored nations, we're all in this together. Absolutely.
They pimped us. They totally pimped us, and we all got insecure, and there was this scarcity mentality, and I'm bummed about that part of the demise of the business.
I am too. And when I moved here in 1981, here being Los Angeles, from Miami, one of the things I already saw that in the TV world, where there were people that, a lot of people got their start in television, writing for animated cartoons. And the whole deal was, you can come write for us, you give us the music for free. And then you get your royalties. And I just went, well, fuck this. I'm just not that interested in writing for TV so badly that I just want to give my songs and my compositions away. So I didn't. I have other friends who did, and they became successful television writers. But, I remember just not liking that. I thought it was really not a good thing.
It's bullshit. It's bullshit because they'll come to you and it'll be like, oh my God, we have this season finale thing and we want to put your song in this scene and we'll put your name really on it at the end of the crawl. Right. Exactly. You'll put your name in the chyron and it'll be moving faster than anyone could possibly read. And you'll be like, no. And then they'll turn around and pay you $200,000 to have like a 20-second clip of one of their songs in this pivotal scene but they'll pimp the indie, which is so ironic and so bad. So, there's so many things I want to ask you. Just like a quick aside, when we were talking about songwriting, you wrote a song and recorded it in French. I'm not going to attempt to say the title. You can. I looked up the translation. It's basically "Careful What You Wish For." Yeah. Well, the one that I wrote in French is called "Je ne peux pas te plaire." Oh, I cannot please you. That's what. I just can't please you. Yeah. I just can't please you. Did you write it in French or did you translate your English lyrics? That's my question. No, I wrote it in French. I wrote it in French. Yeah, because I'm not a good enough. My French isn't that good that I could translate poetically, so it has to sort of come out in ways that make sense to me as, French is a second language person. But it was I was in Paris in a very old history neighborhood, and the song seemed to jump out of the walls into the bathtub where I was having a bath, and it was this formed and finished song. It's a beautiful song. Thanks. Well, all the most tragic verbs in French seem to rhyme, so I just lined them all up and saw what happened. Let's talk about Woody Guthrie. Okay. You had this amazing experience. You were actually invited by Woody's daughter, I believe. Yes. You had access to lyrics that he had written that had never been released. You recorded, used, and you ended up collaborating with Woody Guthrie. And can you share some of that story? Yeah, it's a good one. I wasn't an aficionado. I wasn't a huge follower of his life and story. But when I met his daughter, we really hit it off. She was a modern dancer too. Her mother was one of the original Martha Graham dancers. So we had all this sort of common language. And originally I was supposed to just find a couple of lyrics in the archives and write music for them for a benefit concert. But I just kind of fell madly in love with her dad. And so she invited me in to make a full record of his words and my music. And it was such a beautiful process. It really did almost feel like he was in the room with me. Mm-hmm. It felt effortless and painless. And most importantly, Nora was incredibly generous with me. I would ask her like, hey, Nora, I found this gorgeous couplet in this one journal, but there's not a lot around it. Are you cool if I put this with this other scrap, this sort of tattered napkin that he scribbled on from 20 years later? But I think they go together. And are you cool with that? And she would just say, yeah, do it. Don't worry about Woody. He'll be fine. This is about you. This is your record, and make it about generous. You. Totally. Because, there are people that are sticklers for, it must be exactly as he wrote it at the moment. Right. And you cannot, cross-contaminate thoughts and words and poems. But she was really awesome that way. And I just commend her for her faith in me. And I thank her. Well, and as a writer and as an artist that in the words that you just used are cross-contamination, but there's that's the process, the creative process. It's this beautiful cross-contamination of things that you thought of 20 years ago and things that you're thinking of today and what you have for breakfast and who you're standing in front of. And, it's all like kismet and superstition and like the planetary alignment. And you're right. What you had for dinner last night is huge. Yeah.
Jumping back to dance, because you were talking about Martha Graham. Did you ever did you study with Martha Graham or Merce Cunningham, or did you have, what was your modern dance? How far did you take it?
Well, I was dancing professionally kind of from the time I was 16. I was in a couple of jazz companies in Boston, and then I went to college and I got a English literature degree, but kept dancing through college and then moved back to Boston. So I was dancing with the Spencer Colton Collaborative. They were Twyla Tharp dancers that got out of New York and moved to Boston and created a company there. I was in the Paradigm Dance Company. I was in Susan Rose's company. Like any of the sort of happen in modern dance companies in Boston, I was probably in it at some point.
Right. Thanks for that little aside. Back to Woody Guthrie and that whole experience. One of the songs that I was listening to this past week when I'm preparing for our conversation was your arrangement of "This Land Is Your Land," which is, of course,
cool.
One of the more well-known songs of Woody Guthrie. And maybe some people don't know that he wrote that, but he did. But you featured a kalimba on the arrangement, and I know it's one of your favorite instruments and one that you play. But how did an African percussion instrument become such a prominent part of that arrangement for you?
Well, for me, that particular kalimba and the tuning that it happens to be in, it was a part of my mom's show again. Like it is the really pivotal 11 o'clock number of my mom's show, and it's a song called "Time." And so for me, that sound and that particular tuning has this immense sadness and universal pain to it in a way. The song in the mom show is about facing death and not being ready. And when I was thinking of like doing "This Land Is Your Land," it's just been such an awful time in this country of division and inequity, and this land isn't your land. This land isn't my land. It's like, it's the 1%'s land. And I just thought, well, the original is so happy, this land is your land. It's very major and very like jaunty, and it's like a polka. Mm-hmm. It's like a friggin' polka. I wanted to make a dark version that reflected what I really feel about this country at the moment. And so that's how that came about. And the kalimba just felt like this great mournful way to give it a bed, a rhythmic and harmonic bed that would convey all those things.
You're this is leading me to another question. After collaborating with Woody Guthrie, with his lyrics, and it must have in some way felt like you were actually collaborating with him for real in person, because there's such an intimacy to sharing unreleased lyrics and things like that too. So, did your perspective or your sense of social responsibility change in any way? And, or do you still view songwriting as more of a personal reflection on your life and the human experience, or do you also feel a social responsibility? And the reason I'm asking is, I know your song "Imposter," some people think it was written about Trump, and you actually wrote it about yourself and the feeling that so many artists experience of just being a phony, and the idea that they're faking it. So, I just asked you 8 questions right now, but, can you talk about all of that?
Yeah, I think I can. I've always kind of shied away from being political or soapboxy or preachy. The one song that's the exception, there's a song called "War" on the Plum record, which I wrote after the first Gulf War and in sort of a protest. But I had, for the most part, stayed away from being overtly political. I think the Woody record, at least most of the lyrics that I was drawn to were poetic and romantic and not political, because I wanted to expose this other side of Woody. Mm-hmm. But then when I did sort of feel this stirring of like, all right, well, what am I going to say next, and how am I going to say it? And I can't not say what I feel. And that led to doing This Land Is Your Land in that way. And then my next couple of years were taking care of my mom, and, everything ground to a halt. My career was just on hold, and I was 24/7 my mom's caregiver. And that's what led to My Mother Has Four Noses, the record, and the Off-Broadway show. And in a way, that became as much of a stirrer of wanting to talk about important things, and that in particular being caregiving and dementia and life and death and love and choices and failure and all the things, and religion and faith, and which led to Midnight Hallelujah, which was a record where I was really questioning faith, and I was putting it out there in a way I hadn't before, because the mom show was definitely telling truths I had never told before. And so that, I think it all sort of culminated in me being a little more vocal about stuff. There's a song on Midnight Hallelujah called Put the Gun Down, and it's not like, gun people are bad and like screw the NRA. It's like a smaller story inside of that, which is always how I prefer to go. And you start that song, you're just right in the story. There's no ramp up. You just start the song by saying, "Put the gun down." That's the very first line. Well, I was like, okay, that's a. I was really proud of, like, wait a minute, that's how that song starts. It's great. It's great. I just stopped everything when I heard that. Put the gun down. You just, it's bam, you're right in on it. Like, okay, listen to me, douchebag. So, not douchebag necessarily, but. Well, no, but whatever it was that's going to come after that, I needed to know, because it's like, where is this going? I was in it. I was in it from the very first line. I want to talk about your mom and the play, and I want to preface that by saying that I read one review of your music, and it might have been one of your other records, or it might have been about the show, but what they said I thought was really profound, and it was that trauma has a wonderful effect on Jonatha. And I said, that's so interesting, and because when I thought about your mom and her dementia, Alzheimer's, and the play, which I want you to talk about, but the question that I want also to ask you about that is, where do you find the courage to strive to write songs with such a deep level of honesty, or have you always been an open book about everything? And, I'm curious about that, but I want everybody to know about this play and how it relates to the question. Yeah, wow. Well, I think you're very courageous. I think you're very courageous. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I love that trauma is a good thing for me. Isn't that great? I'm still chewing on that because, I guess, like, I'm great in a crisis, man. If you need, I can get through anything. So that's one thing. But over the years, it's kind of funny because as I write records and release them into the world, I will often realize that I've probably said too much, but there are already 100,000 records circulating with everything that I've said. So, right. True to that tendency, I seem to not be able to hold back. I mean, there are even songs in the very first, in my band, The Story, I had a song called The Angel in the House, which was pretty pointedly about my parents' divorce, which was a shock. And, all this stuff came out about the family that no one had known. And it was just this revelation to me. And of course I had to write the song about it. And, my brothers were like, you can't write that song. You can't say those things. And so I stuffed it for a couple of years. And I was like, the song wouldn't get finished. It was like I was talking about earlier, like it almost killed and splintered a fledgling idea that needed to be sung. And luckily I persevered, and I told the story, and I wrote the song, and I gutted through the awkwardness when my parents would be in the audience or, at Thanksgiving. It was my prerogative. It's my story. It's the way I saw it and the way I felt it. And so that's the way I sang it and wrote it. And I think that's kind of been, for better or worse, my MO, especially with the mom story. wow, that was the really hardest truthful thing to do, because I had never, ever before spoken about the religion I was raised in, Christian Science. And in dealing with my mom, dealing with her dementia, dealing with the illness that brought us together even 12 years before dementia set in, which was skin cancer that really destroyed her face.
Right. This is a literal. My mother has four noses. It's not just. It's not just figurative. She went
not
through
a metaphor for dementia.
No.
No. I had never ever spoken publicly about the fact that Mom had these prosthetic noses, and that it was a result of really, really believing that prayer would heal this skin cancer on her face, and it didn't. And so, a year later, after many, many surgeries and radiation, lots of crazy stuff that we went through, she was fine, which was great. But she had four. They make her, if you get a new nose, they make you four, just in case you lose one, or you get more, you get a little more freckled in the summer. So you need your summer nose and your winter nose. And
that makes sense. I mean, you own two Olsen guitars, not one, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, the irony of it all and the pathos and the beautiful part of the story was, number one, Mom had an amazing sense of humor about it. And especially as she got more and more demented, she got funnier about the noses, and it just became part of this clownish character that she loved to make us laugh, and she loved theater and wordplay and great drama. And so that became part of our daily caregiving, was participating in Mom's whatever she was working on that day, which could have been like a musical about breakfast, or a poem about a train ride to somewhere. None of us could really follow her, and then there was always songs about the noses.
Was it exhausting emotionally and spiritually for you to do that play? To perform it, not to write it. I'm sure it was exhausting to write it because it's so honest and raw.
Yeah, it was all of the things. It was incredibly powerfully reassuring, and it buoyed me in the sense of that I felt like I was telling everybody's story, and there was so much gratitude and recognition in the audience every night. And yes, I was just gutted by the end. By 12 weeks in, I could. I was wrecked, and I was only doing 7 shows a week, not 8, so that helped. But it was cathartic and beautiful and exhausting and all the things.
So back to my question, Jonatha, where do you find the courage? Where do you think that came from? Were you born with that? Or did you develop it? Is it from your mom and dad? It's weird because I don't know, because I don't, in some ways, well, my dad was a really fearless storyteller. He was, I wonder, it just occurred to me this second, because he was covering the civil rights stuff in the South for the Christian Science Monitor. He was traveling to Belfast to cover the Troubles. He was meeting with all of these other people, like, how do we cover these stories? How do we get at all of the sides of each story? So maybe it is my dad. Huh. Yeah. Because I don't consider myself a fearless person. I mean, I'm not, I'm never putting on ice skates again. No, I get that, because I kind of feel a kinship with you on that, because I'm certainly not fearless, but I share with you this sense of just courage to get through things, with the most integrity and honesty that I can. And if you ask me where that came from, I'm not sure I would know how to answer that question either. Yeah. So that's why I was curious.
And maybe there are two kinds of fearlessness. There's a sort of creative fearlessness, and then there's just sort of physical getting through the day fearlessness. And they might be very different.
And thanks for answering that with such honesty. I appreciate that. You mentioned not, being terrible at skating, by the way, just making a joke. But I do want to also let people know that you are really amazing at riding a unicycle, walking on stilts, and hula hoops. So I don't want anybody to get it twisted, and just, just saying, if anybody ever needs like a great singer-songwriter with, those extra
who can also
set of
ride
skills.
a unicycle. Yeah. Yep. Actually, hula hoop is really my specialty.
Oh, it is? Okay, good to know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Duly noted. You know something? We only have about 6 minutes left in our conversation, so I'm going to head towards our closing questions, and if there's any time left over, we'll get back to everything else.
Okay.
And these are questions that I ask all of my guests, and the first is a two-part question. This show is called Making It. So what is and you can take this anywhere you go.
Well, of course, look, I've been on a bus with men for 30 years, so
well, we had I had Bruce Valanche on the show as a guest, and he took it all the way,
Yeah,
with this question. Yeah, of course he did. But what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally? And the second part of the question is, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career? So first of all, making it. What does it mean to you?
Making it. Okay, so whichever way you choose to take it, I think that it should lead to satisfaction. You should be satisfied, and whether that is like making it and like freaking having a great time in the sack, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then making it professionally needs to be your own definition of success. It needs to be like, okay, where's the bar for me? Where's that restaurant for me? And that's something that Pat and I talk about year after year. We sort of recalibrate as things shift and rugs get pulled from beneath our feet. We recalibrate and we say, okay, what's this year's enough? What's this year's satisfaction? Like, what will feel great? And, in 2014, it was like, we're producing this show. We're taking it off Broadway. We know we've never done this before, but we're going to figure it out. It can't be rocket science. We've built shows before. We do it every day on the road. And so we did it. And that was that year's. Wow, that was super satisfying. And the New York Times loved it. And Time Out loved it. And man, that felt great. That was satisfaction. And then, each year we kind of recalibrate, and it's, am I fulfilled? Am I writing the way I want to write? Is this record what I want it to sound like? Am I able to do what I love? Yes, and yes. And can I sustain, can I pay the bills? So far, yes. So I'm making it.
Yes, you are. Absolutely.
And then as far, what was it? 3 things for
Can
who?
you share three right. I have so many questions. The question is, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Don't be an asshole ever. Because, it's a small world and it will come around. And there's no excuse. 2, always write creative control into any kind of situation that you are in. Record contract, gig contract, whatever it is, like, keep control of your particular unique voice. Number 3, if you ever get a big chunk of money, put it the fuck away.
Yes.
There.
Yes. Great tips. Absolutely wonderful.
Am I allowed to swear now that I've sworn the whole time?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You are. So my final question, Jonatha, is, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self if you could?
You're doing a really good job. Don't doubt anything. Trust that inner compass, because you're doing a good job. That's so funny, because that's an assignment I give sometimes in my songwriting workshops. I have people write letters to their younger selves.
Beautiful. So we have about 2 minutes left in the show. So, I want to turn it over to you on this to talk about anything that you want to talk about, including these songwriting workshops that you do that I'm so curious about, that, how you are able to find the balance to physically, to tour and then also, mentor and teach. I think it's great that you're doing that.
It's kind of cool. I didn't realize that I was a teacher, but it turns out I like it. And
how could you not be in the family that you grew up with? And
I know we're all teachers. It's so
we
duh.
are. Well, and also
I get this sooner.
And we're at the point of our lives. I mean, this is the chapter in our lives where we're supposed to be mentoring.
I know. I resisted it at first, and now I love it. And I love. I feel like we know a lot now, don't we? We
sure do.
It's time to give it back.
So in the last minute and a half of the show, what would you like to say and tell people about you and your life and what you're doing? Besides, everybody go to jonathabrooke.com. And by the way, we're going to post the website and links so you can go listen to all of your music.
Okay, here's my new amazing and scary thing. I'm actually teaching a workshop in August in Provincetown about developing your voice for your character, like developing characters for theater, like developing your solo show, working on dialogue and that version of storytelling, which, for me seems to be this new door that's opening. I'm working on 2 other musicals, and I did this one-woman show, and I'm seem to be I'm drawn to the light of the theater. So that's my new exciting news is this theater workshop in August, and then these other 2 musicals I'm working on. So
one of them
who knows?
Is that's fantastic that you're again being courageous and just walking into new experiences. One of the new projects that you're doing is collaborative with Joe Sample, who is a dear friend of both of ours. Joe is a mentor and a friend of mine. So I'm so excited that you're doing that. I just think it's going to be incredible.
It's beautiful. We wrote 20 songs together before he passed away, and we did get a little reading in of our musical we were working on. So it's a little bit on hold right now, obviously, because we're all regrouping and trying to figure out where to take it next. But boy, was that an amazing experience.
Well, on that note, Jonathan, thank you so much for spending the hour with me. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you so much, Terry.
Everybody, we'll see you next week. We appreciate you spending the hour with us.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.